Thank you for waiting, and I'm sorry for this delay.
You can start. Yeah.
Yes.
We,
um,
we, we will have some minutes at the end to make the question for the three presentations. So you can start. Thank you.
okay, I'll start immediately. As you can see, this presentation is going to focus on attention to diversity and inclusion. And my name is Jill Surmont, and my collaborator on this is Pascale Fierens, who is in the room there with you. And we are from the Free University of Brussels, from the teacher training department there. And maybe if you can go to the third slide, you can see what we understood under diversity and inclusion. Because when it comes to inclusion, you will find a myriad of different definitions and ways that you can work with it. But for us in education, it meant something that you respect humans as who they are, and that you respond to their needs, and you do it in such a way that you try to design everything from a perspective that takes those differences into account and doesn't see normal as a very limited box. And if you're outside that scope of what is normal, and I put normal between quotation marks, that you need additional things that will just try to broaden that scope. And in that way, and I think that the way that Pansek and Florian have formulated it, that you go from giving education or providing education for some and most learners, that you can provide it for everyone. And for me, that's a very important point of education, because we want all learners to achieve things and to develop themselves. So we need to ensure that education is for all of them. So why diversity and inclusion? And if you go to the next slide, you will see a number of reasons why. You will see that when it comes to pupils with learning disabilities, you will see that if you help them, and if you provide frameworks, that they will have beneficial results, not only within academic sectors, but also when it comes to employment later in life. So if you make sure that they are able to get their education in an inclusive setting, they will benefit from it. But, and that's also very important, because that's an important remark, that's a remark that's often being made, is that, yeah, well, it's all very well if you look at the people or at the pupils that have additional learner needs, but what about the rest? The level cannot go down. They also, the pupils without learning disabilities, they cannot be the victim of that inclusive focus. Well, we see if it's done well, they don't have any negative effects from that as well. So it's a win-win. We also see that when it comes to diversity, I mean, diversity is not just learning disabilities, it's also, for example, gender inclusive education. And there we see that there's a lot of LGBTQI plus people that often fall victim to violence or bullying, and that happens both in and out of the school. And then if you don't provide a safe environment for them, and if you don't provide both teachers and pupils with the necessary tools to create an inclusive environment and to create an open mindset for that, then that is only gonna that's a problem that will only become a more and more societal issue, and will affect in a very negative way the life that people will lead, because they have a different sexual orientation. So you need to have that inclusive element there as well. And we know that schools and teachers, that they will have a very important role to reverse that situation. They can give people the necessary tools, because it's not always easy from different religious backgrounds, perspectives, to embrace LGBTQI plus gender roles and all that, to have a more open mindset. But there are different ways to help teachers to create that open mind set. And then there is also within gender, you also see, so it's not only about gender inclusiveness, but it's also about stereotypes. There's a quote from Philip Mons, who is a professor at the University of Antwerp here in Belgium, who focuses on math education. And he says, yeah, well, there is no evidence that girls are less suited for mathematics than boys, but however, you see that they are actually always scoring lower, and that's because there are these lower expectations. You create these self-fulfilling prophecies. So you need to do something with that as well. You need to make sure that, you know, the way that you see your pupils, that it's not because they're a girl or a boy that they will not be able to do mathematics, because there's just no evidence for that. That's based on your gender. So that's another reason why we should work on diversity and inclusion. And another reason, a different topic, and also a different slide then, that we, thank you, a different reason to work on diversity and inclusion, or a different topic, is because of language barriers. We see that there's an increase of non-native speakers in classrooms, and that affect learning outcomes. You see that in PISA results, you see that in a number of different studies, where you see that not having mastered the language of instruction or not having it as a mother tongue is one of the variables that affect learning outcomes. We also see that there's an increase of multilingual programs such as CLIL, Content and Language Integrated Learning, where you will have an additional language, an additional instruction language as part of the curriculum. And in both those situations, you create settings in which pupils are asked to learn content in a language that they haven't mastered yet better. So that creates barriers. And of course, it's important as a teacher that you're able to either prevent or overcome those potential language barriers. And that requires a specific skill set. And that specific skill set is so crucial because, for example, in Brussels, where we are from, you see that's a very multilingual city, with a lot of nationalities, a lot of languages, a lot of cultures that come together, also a lot of poverty. So it's a really complex situation. But you see that the teachers that teach there, that they're often less experienced teachers. So it's often the teachers that have just graduated that find a job in Brussels, but they have their teacher degree. And in this day and age of teacher shortages, we are already happy if they have some kind of teacher degree, but that's a different discussion. But they lack the skills. They have basic knowledge, or the starting knowledge of how to teach, but they don't know how to cope with that diversity. And what happens then is that you'll have the most vulnerable students being taught by the less experienced teachers, and those less experienced teachers within 5 years often leave that setting. Either they leave the setting and go to a more even better, a less complicated setting, or they leave education as a whole. And then they are being replaced with new, fresh teachers that lack that experience. So you see that not having that skill set to overcome those language barriers, it creates a problem. So that's a really crucial one, to get them understand how can we prevent or overcome potential language barriers. And then, of course, another reason to work on diversity and inclusion are legal reasons. There are a number of different agreements, I'm going to call them, that basically states that we are forced, or that we all agree that we will work on inclusive education. You've got the Salamanca Statement, but also in the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, you have SDG 4 that aims to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. Now, that equity is a very important one, because what does equity mean? They divide it into fairness and inclusion, and fairness means making sure that personal and social circumstances, such as gender, socioeconomic status, ethnic origin, that it's not an obstacle to achieve potential, to achieve educational potential. And inclusion refers to ensuring a basic minimum standard of education for all, meaning that everybody should be able to read, write, and do simple arithmetic skills. So you've got that fairness in there. And it's that fairness that we want to work with here. And I'm sorry that I'm going at such high speed, but I have a lot to tell you and I don't have that much time. Those 3 reasons, or actually 4 reasons, are basically why we want to focus within this project on diversity and inclusion as well. Because if we want that math class to work with that game-based learning, to work with that cooperative learning, etc., we want to make sure that we're able to cope with the diversity and inclusion that is needed to get all learners to maximum their learner uptake. So what did we do? We, as you already gathered, focused on 3 elements of diversity. We're not saying that the 3 elements that we chose, or the 3 sections of diversity, are the only sections. Not at all, but these are the ones that we chose because we felt that they were the most present currently, namely inclusion for learners with all sorts of disabilities, gender inclusion, and language inclusion. We know that there are a lot of things out there already, but teachers still struggle. So what we aimed to do was not to create a new framework. We did not want to reinvent the hot water. We wanted to develop something, some kind of tool that would support teachers to use the knowledge that's already out there, to use the frameworks that are already out there, to translate that into their own practice. So we are trying, or we have developed some kind of screening tool. And how have we done that? We did it in 3 steps. We first did a literature review, where we were looking for evidence-informed frameworks and select there one of them, or combine them to see what is evidence-informed, and also what is something that we can work with. And then we sat together with a number of experts. And with experts, I mean people that both have knowledge of the mathematics classrooms, of how things go. I mean, how you teach a mathematical classroom, that have been teaching maths as well, but also at the same time have academical background, that know the scientific backbone of the frameworks that we use. And we set up collaborative process with them to ensure that the tools that we would develop, that screening tool that we would develop, that we could, that we not just did something, but that we had some kind of soundboard. But we also had several feedback rounds with international user groups, where we presented what we had at the time and asked them, can you use this? And we did that with both student learners. We did that also with teachers who were already at work, who are already teaching mathematics, and then constantly ask them feedback. Can you use, what do we need to do to improve the screening tool even more?
We will have 5 more minutes.
Okay, I'm going to go very quickly. Thank you for the time management. We selected frameworks. For the first one, we had Universal Design for Learning, where we worked via engagement, representation, action, and representation. For gender inclusion, we worked with the work of Seaburn, and then for language, we worked with sheltered language instruction. Now, I'm gonna skip a little bit the information about Universal Design for Learning, but I think that the next slide, this one. I think actually this one kind of captures it completely, because what is UDL? It basically says that when you design your lesson, that you make sure that the design of your stadium, in this case, is already inclusive. And as you see on this image, instead of making sure that the short people have extra things to stand on so that they can look over the fence, that you just make sure that the fence is see-through so that they can see the game as well. So that basically within your design, you make sure that people with some kind of disability that they can already follow. And an example is very simple: the letter type that you use for people with dyslexia. The first one is much more readable than the second one, because there's this the little lines are not there, and that makes it easier for them to identify the letters, and they will make less mistakes. So UDL is choosing very consciously to use, for example, sans serif instead of the serif type. So that's our main source. All the next slides I'm going to skip because I cannot do that within 1 minute, because I'm going to talk about gender next. And that I can do a bit faster, because what we did here is we used the utilization approach and the disruptive approach by Seaburn. And on the next slide, you will find the information of those two approaches, where the utilization approach says that you will use that inclusion within materials. You will, for example, instead of always talking about a mom and a dad, you will have one parent family, or you will have a two dad family. And you will not make gender into an issue, but you will just make sure that it's represented in the course material, and that it's something that people come across with, that your pupils come across with, so that it is considered more to be normal, that it becomes usual, and it's not something that is done separately. The disruptive approach, on the other hand, is where you will confront issues, where you will really point things out, and you will start the conversation. We, spoiler alert, we have also found that in a math class, the disruptive approach is not a very good approach, because within the maths approach, within a math class, it's much more difficult to have those kind of conversations, because the content of math is not always easy as a starter of a conversation. So that's for gender. And then for language, I'm also going to skip a lot of information to just end up with the inclusion of multilingual learners, where we are very clear that not every teacher should be a language teacher, but that every teacher should be language competent. And the framework of Hayek Mestringa, who works on sheltered content instruction, where you will have all these kinds of support tools for teachers to overcome language barriers, was something that we felt was very appropriate within this project. So what did we do? We created screening instruments based on the feedback. And how do we want this tool to be used? Because that's a very important one, and that's something that we had a lot of discussion with our experts, and also Pascal and I, on how do we want this tool to be used. We don't want this tool to be used by one individual only. We want this tool to be used for teachers within their school to start their own practices, to screen their own practices and see what can we do better. And we also don't want them to use the screening tool completely at one point. Saturday night, I'm going to screen my entire curriculum. That's not the case. It's just that we want them to pick out one topic or even one subtopic, and then do the screening, and then see within the team how can we increase that, so that you can actually support the collaborative teacher efficacy. And those of you who are well aware of what Hattie has found to be one of the most important things to have an impact on learning outcomes, is that collective teacher efficacy. So if we can support that collaborative teacher efficacy and increase the collective teacher efficacy, then that's something that we absolutely aim for. And also we need to make sure that it's user friendly. So where are we at? Well, we created a online tool, or we are creating it, Where we, for example, as you can see, if you click on here, if you go through it, you can choose what do you want to go over, and then you will also end up with the screening tool to start that discussion. And within the next steps, on the next slide, we want to finalize the tool, make sure that all guidelines are clear. So there we are crossing our T's and dotting our I's, and provide translations, because of course we want to make sure that it's available in different languages. And then it's ready to distribute to the work field, and hopefully increase that collective teacher affinity and increase the inclusive education within the maths. And I hope that I'm still within my time. Thank you all very much.